Hey MSM fam, welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year's. It's 2021, so hopefully this year everything that you've been working towards comes to you, and I hope you guys are at home, staying warm, and enjoying the holiday break. So today we're going to be talking about jewel comparisons. In particular, we're going to be talking about the SS Blue, SSS Yellow, and SS Purple. Let's try and find out which one will give us the most stats. Stats as in like damage. So I wanted to preface this video with your mileage may vary. Keep in mind that all of these tests were done on a Wind Archer with my specific gear build. My gear build being like 8 crit damage and 1 boss attack. So what you find on your own test may actually be different than what I found in this video. And if it is different, I would love it if we could have a conversation about kind of like what you did differently, as well as what you found in doing your tests, because I think that way would actually make it pretty fun to talk about. Cool. So let's talk about what we're going to compare today. So we have the SS Blue Jewels on the left. These give us 8.5% fizz damage, 4% speed, 3% accuracy, and 500 magic defense. Pretty cool. The fizz damage is pretty nice. We don't get that a lot aside from like passives and buffs. In the middle, we have SSS EXP jewels. We have 20% EXP, 5% drop rate, and 300 knockback resist. The reason why I've done SSS jewels is simply because I don't have 5 yellow SS yellow jewels. I had just fused these SSS jewels and I only have 4 SS jewels, but I think this will make for a more interesting test anyways, because I think I may have mentioned in a previous video that my gear is mostly EXP based. So this kind of shows like where the biases would come from, because if my gear is EXP flamed, it should actually put more of an emphasis to make the EXP jewels shine. So we'll find out in a little bit what that kind of like contributes and works up to. And on the right, we have boss jewels. Boss jewels give us 8% boss attack, 3% crit damage, 3% boss defense, and a 2% crit rate. So these are the goods. All right, so let's just dive into it. Like, how did I actually go about testing it, right? Because I could just present all this data without showing you how we actually got to the results, and it could either mean you could just take my word for it and just take it as I did my homework and it just works, or you're actually curious about how we got to those results. In the next section, I'll go into kind of talk about that. So here's how I kind of shook my tail feathers. The setup. So I decided to go with a full buff run per a few of our guildmates and friends recommendations, because the purpose of this is to find out and kind of emulate the same conditions that we would be in when we are bossing. So when I'm bossing, I normally full buff and team buff so that I'm ready to help my team pass some of the harder expeditions. So a full buff for me means we use our Tangyuns. Those are 20% buffs. We use the 30% buffs, which are the Crit Juice, the Candy Basket, and Chestnut. I'm a fizz damage dealer, so that's why they're baskets. I believe it's a Candy Cane for magic dealers. And then for the 50%, we have a Shrimp, a Yogurt, and I even just threw in the Boss Rush Potion just because I wanted to emulate, like, what does it look like taken to the extreme? Like, when we throw all of our buffs at it, what happens? Then I also have like team buffs such as like Speed Infusion, the Evan buff, Combat Orders, Unmanaged Anger, and the Wild Hunter buff. And then, so those are all the buffs. And then after all the buffs, what I did was I recorded myself in CVB. I chose CVB because it's one of the harder RA runs. Like, it's one of the hard expeditions we have available. And it has crit resist and it has crit resist or crit damage resistances. And we kind of know that they're around 35%. So that should really matter, like which boss we chose. It just matters that we're trying to limit the number of variables that we're going to change in our experiment. So in this experiment, we're essentially just going to keep everything the same with the full buff, the team buffs, and we're just going to cycle through all of our joules. So we'll start with the blue joules, then the yellow joules, the purple joules, without changing any of our gear except the joules. So after we kind of have our like video of the joules in action, how are we actually going to turn that into like results? What we're going to do is we're going to count all the lines. We're going to calculate the min, the max, and the average of those lines. Just basic like simple math. Just like, hey, what was the minimum for each? What was the maximum? And when you add them all up, what was the average? And then I'll report the findings to you guys for each one of the joules. So when I was doing this, this counting of the lines, it actually was pretty hard. Hard in the sense that it wasn't like technically challenging or hard or like anything that I didn't kind of understand it at the basis. It was more like that. It was just that there were a lot of lines for for the Wind Archer. For the Wind Archer, like we are known as the one hit or one button class because all of our skills kind of synergize on top of that one button. But even when, so like that, because of all that synergy, we have a lot of lines per second. And here's the video, or pretty much how I collected the lines was I had to watch the video at 0.07x speed. One is kind of the normal speed level, like you would watch, like a regular video that you would watch would be at 1x speed. This is roughly at like a tenth of that, like less than a tenth. And it's still kind of hard to read, so it was a bit tedious. And then the next part that was kind of a little bit tough was that the skill damage percents for a Wind Archer are very similar. Like we have one main attack, as I mentioned, which is Song of Heaven. But then for that one Song of Heaven, we actually have a lot of helpers on top. What I mean by helpers are like procs or passives that build on top of that. So I won't bore you with the details. If you are interested in like learning more about the Wind Archer class, feel free to shoot me a DM or leave a comment or just Discord me. But just take my word for it that there are a lot of like skill percentages that build off of the main hit. And what I did for that was I kind of just grouped up the 7 different attacks that we have, which is like Song of Heaven first and second hits, the Song of Heaven third hit, Stormbringer, Trifling Wind level 30, Trifling Wind level 60, and Trifling Wind level 100. And then there is the add damage hyperstat. I kind of grouped them up into 5 distinct groups based off of their skill percentages and what I saw from the data. Like these kind of fall within the same like bracket or tier of damage range. And if we do that for all 3 of the joules, then we kind of have the similar foundation to kind of make the next steps, like how we calculate our results. So we can also talk more in detail about this one, but not to kind of like dive too deep into it. I essentially took the 7 different attacks and grouped them into 5. Those are the Trifling Wind. Then there are the main hit, crit, and non-crit. So S1NC stands for Song of Heaven 1. I didn't write 2 because 1 and 2 are the same. So S1NC is Song of Heaven first and second hit, non-crit. S1C is Song of Heaven 1 crits. And then S3NC is just Song of Heaven 3, like their third hit, non-crit. And SE3 is Song of Heaven third hit, criticals. Cool. So after I counted up all of the lines, after hitting spacebar pretty much every half second just to get all of this, we kind of see the data from the blue, the yellow, and the purple. This might be kind of hard to see, but just take my word that I counted all of them and then computed the min, max, and average for them. So here's the data for the SS blue joules. So the 5 categories that we talked about before were like Trifling Wind, the main hit non-crit, main hit crit, main hit third shot non-crit, main hit, third shot, crit. So on the left side, we have the minimum for that. We have the minimum, we have the maximum. We summed up the all the data points from the min to the max. That gives us the sum. Then we counted up the number of data points that we have, and that is the count. I'll go into the ratio in just a second. The average is just the sum divided by the count. So the line about the ratio is that we already kind of know that the Wind Archer has procs, and these procs are essentially like hits that have a chance of happening. So for the Wind Archer, every hit except for Song of Heaven is a proc, and that made calculating and counting things much harder. But what we can do is essentially, when watching the video from the beginning to the end for a specific segment, we can just count up the number of lines for the main hits, which are S1C, S1NC, and S3C and S3NC. So the ratio just shows that, like, for S1C, I've taken that as the base because for every main hit, which is S1C, we should expect to see a lot more of S1C than everything else because that's our main attack. And we kind of do see that because when counting the data, we have 126 counts or data points for S1C compared to, like, say 99 of Trifling Wind, 47 of the non-crit of the main hits, and then compared to the every third hit, there's like still about it's about two-thirds of S1C. So the ratios kind of fall in line. We can talk more deeply about it if you're curious, but essentially here's how I kind of put together the data. And then the same for the SSS Yellow, and then the SS Purple. So I'll put like chapters for these so that you guys don't have to worry about this jumping too quickly. There's a summary at the end. If at any point any of this gets too deep, you can just feel free to use the chapters to skip to the next section. So then taking the three computations from before of the blue, yellow, and purple, I put them together in this one chart, which essentially compares the min-max of each type. So, like, because we had 5 different types that we grouped into, we will have 10 kind of like columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, we have 10. I just counted to make sure that we did have 10. Essentially, the reason why we have 10 is because there are min and maxes of those columns. And I wanted to compare like which one had the highest highs and the lowest lows. So you can take a second to pause and take a look at all the numbers. Essentially, I've highlighted them to correlate with what the minimum and maximums are of each column. So starting from the left, for Trifling Wind, the minimum, like the lowest amount of damage that we saw, was that blues do the lowest minimums, and the highest Trifling Wind small hits came from yellow. So this shows us that like blue has the lowest low and the yellow has the highest low. Highest low, lowest low. It gets really confusing. You can kind of go through each column and talk about it, but essentially I think that would take like a really long amount of time, and I want to just cut to like, hey, what do we actually learn from this? So on the bottom, we can see that blue has the largest range. It has the largest range because it is both the lowest low, as we saw on the left side, and it also has the highest high on the right side. Technically, all of them have the highest high because I can hit the 7.5 mil damage cap with all 3 types. But if we move one column to the left of the one all the way on the right, we can still see that the blue has the highest maximum range for the minimum of our Song of Heaven third hit. That would be the S3C minimum. And if you see on the max row, you can see that color is blue at 6.1, 6.2 million. So blue had the largest range is kind of what I found. For the yellow one, we saw that it had the highest minimum and it had the highest main hits crit. So that is S1C max and TW min. It didn't really do anything else aside from those two, it kind of fell in the middle of blue and purple, even though it was an SSS jewel and my flames were flamed for it, like geared towards it, I mean. We can kind of see that purple has the highest main hit minimum, meaning like our main hit is kind of our Song of Heaven first and second hits. And when it crits, because when we're bossing, we actually hope for crits because we've used a lot of crit juices and tank units for it. So we see that it has the highest minimum for that. It actually has the highest minimum by quite a large amount. It has it over the minimum by about 360K. It's quite a substantial amount considering that it's our like main hit, right? Like it's our main minimum, but it's our main minimum critical hit, meaning like this should be the majority of our hits. So aside from that, we can kind of see purple is like teetering kind of on the minimum for everything else. Like, so what have we actually learned from this? We learned that blue kind of has like the biggest range. Purple has like the best minimum for our main hits. So after this, what we want to know is actually what are the averages for this? Because like knowing that we have like this range of numbers helps, but what we really want to know is which one will give us the highest consistent damage. And to do the most consistent damage, what we can just do is just take the average of all of them. Like with all the data points that we have, average them all together and just compare them. Like the one that with the highest average will just give us the most, will just give us the maximum amount of damage because that's what the average was. So we took that average and compared them for each type. So we see that blue actually is the highest average for almost everything, except for our third hit of Song of Heaven, S3NC. But keep in mind the S3NC, if you go back a few slides and look at the results of data, the counts for the S3NC are actually really low. Like we just don't have that many data points for it, simply because if you think about what happens for what S3NC stands for, it stands for the third hit of Song of Heaven and a non-crit hit, meaning not only do we have to wait for every third hit, we also have to wait for a non-critical hit. And non-crits are going to be in the minority because we've geared and buffed for crits. So blue actually has the highest averages, surprisingly, meaning like even though what we saw in the min-max for purple, raising the minimum for our main hits, it still doesn't average higher than blue jewels. We can also see that yellow is kind of still in the middle with that small sample size I was talking about. It has the highest third hit non-crit, but we shouldn't be optimizing for that because it's a non-crit hit. So right now it looks like blue is the highest average and largest range of jewel damage. So that's kind of all I have. I thought I could make it more interesting, but this is just like kind of a raw data comparison of jewels. So let me know what you guys think. Does this actually fit with the data that you guys have found? And leave some comments about how I can make it better. Thanks for watching, and Happy New Year's.